control freak. That's right. What happens when someone you hear that? It's no good, right? You don't want to be controlling too much. That's just too much controlling. Don't be micromanaging, and it's just cut it out, right? When someone does the whole control freak phrase. Well, in Photoshop Elements, it's okay to be a control freak. Okay, this is the arena right here where it's all right. You want to control every little piece of it, from the color of this to the color of that, to the shading on the top of that, to the color of Adobe, to the gray of 4.0. You want it all controlled. Yes. All right. Well, I want to make sure you understood a little bit more about layers and how they work. I just want you to have your hands around that a little better. I know we've used layers a little bit, but go into View and Organize Photos. And, alright. Let's pull a picture into, I think this stick figure guy already has layers to him. So let's pull him into the editor. Ah, yes. Layers. Let's see. Well, you know what layers are all about. Sometimes layers can inhibit the view of something underneath it. Like you might think of a layer of paint, where you have one paint color and then you add a layer on top of it. But with some layers, for instance, if you had a black wall and you put on a layer of white over top of it, you'd still see some black show through. So some layers don't necessarily cover over the previous layer entirely, and I'll show you how to do that. So you can adjust whether it covers the layer entirely or not. I'm going to minimize some of these color palettes. Some of these palettes over here. They're not all color palettes. And I'm going to expand the Layers palette. Yes. Okay. These are all different layers, and they're nicely labeled. You'll find this file. We've worked with him before, but just so you know, in the samples folder. Alright, basket, vest, pants, shirt, hat, figure, shadow, and background. This is a perfect one to illustrate layers. There you see the shadow in the background there. Basket, hat. Okay. This bottom layer, whatever is on the bottom, is everything else lays on top of it. So it's just how it sounds. The bottom layer in the Layers palette is truly the bottom layer, and everything else on top of it. The shadow is on top of the background, the figure on top of the shadow, so on and so forth. And you notice that these layers are just objects. That checkered background indicates that the layer is clear there. Now, we mentioned before that sometimes a background layer can't be modified as much as a regular layer can. That's why we can create a layer from the background. We've done that before. We can duplicate a layer, delete a layer, merge visible layers, and flatten image. We'll do both of those bottom two in a moment. I believe we've duplicated and deleted layers before, but it's self-explanatory what those two do. But layer from background, remember, if you're trying to modify this background and you're not getting the desired effect, it won't let you do certain things. Much of the time it's because it's a background layer and you need to turn it into a regular layer before you can make a change. See, this little lock indicates layer is partially locked. So what that does is that prevents you from making changes to it. So if I wanted to lock a layer, see this lock button up here? That's how I'd lock it. If you hover over it, it'll tell you. So these eye buttons here, these are very interesting because these indicate what you're visibly seeing. If you take the eye and click on it, it eliminates that layer from visibility. It's still there, but it eliminates it from visibility. See how the shadow is gone? Now it's back. And you can experiment with making each of the layers disappear. Now the other advantageous thing is you can move layers around. So if you wanted this shadow layer on top of the figure layer, you'd drag it up like that. Didn't really make much of a difference in this scenario. But see, we had the figure, and then we put the hat and the shirt on top of the figure. So the shirt is blocking out the view of the body, so you see the shirt. But if you put the figure over top or as a layer on top of the shirt and hat, notice this. See how that looks weird? Now the shirt is behind the guy and the hat is behind the guy. And it doesn't look right. That's because the figure is now resting as a layer on top of the shirt and blocking it out. So depending on how you structure the layers, it's going to determine how the photo will look. And it's totally going to depend on the photo you're using. So in this case, it was a good idea to the figure and the shadow, it didn't matter which order those two were in, but you definitely wanted all the clothing, the hat, the shirt, the pants, the vest, the basket, all to go on top of the layer of the stick figure. So that's something good to know. Now, we have the create a new layer, delete layer. That does the same as when we right-clicked. A lot of these are duplicate commands, if you're familiar with how that works. And create an adjustment layer. You're mostly going to be dealing with create a new layer and delete layer. Now, the layer opacity is something very interesting. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a new layer. And create it as layer 1. We can rename that layer, whatever we want. Andre's layer. Okay, now that's just a clear layer. You're not seeing anything on it. Now, I'm going to eliminate the visibility on all the layers but the new one I've created. Alright, now all we're seeing is the layer I created, which you can't see because it's clear, because we haven't done anything to it. Now, if we grab the paint bucket, adjust our foreground, and pick a reddish color, like so, and fill in that layer. Now, even if I turn visibility on all of these other ones, like I'm doing right now, I can't see them because this red layer just totally blocks out all the other layers because it's resting on top of them all. Let me turn visibility on. Now, of course, if I drag this down further in the picture, you're going to see more because now it's resting underneath a lot of things. Now it's resting underneath everything and blocking out only the background. Now, here is something that we can have some fun with. This is, I would leave this as normal, but you can experiment with the type of layer opacity. If it's a solid layer, these aren't going to matter much. But if you're going to adjust the opacity to it, like we're going to do right now, then these settings will make a difference. So I'd leave it as normal for this case. Now the opacity determines how much you can see through the layer, how transparent it is, as opposed to opaque. This is an opaque layer, right? So 100% means it's completely opaque, can't see through it. But the more you bring down the opacity, the more you're able to see through it. See, I brought it to 77%. Now you can see through to the background there a little bit. Let's bring it down a little further. So you can actually create a nice, what do you want to call it? It's basically a filter, like almost a camera lens with this. But, okay, first let me finish this idea. So I just added a little bit of a red to the back of the picture. What we could do is we could see how it could look if I bring this on top of all the layers. Right now that little filter of the red is on top of just the background, but the stick figure and all his pieces, you're not seeing that. So that would work good if you wanted to accentuate the stick figure and make the background look a little bit like it's of a different world. But if we wanted the whole picture, we're going to bring it up further. Drag it up and up. And now it's on top. And now that filter is applied to everything underneath it. I'm calling it a filter because I reduced the opacity there. So there's one example with working a little more with layers and using them as effects. But you don't have to use it in a filter for what I mentioned with the opacity. I just eliminated visibility on that layer. If you wanted to take a different layer, like for instance the basket, and lower its opacity and you make it look a little more invisible, watch. See how it's getting lighter and lighter? So you can create almost a ghostly look to something by taking any layer. It doesn't have to be a color layer like this, and bringing its opacity either up or down. So let me grab the picture of the stick guy, just the stick one, that layer. I'm going to bring the opacity down, almost like he's the invisible man. So all his clothes you can see really well, but he's invisible. See? Doesn't that look kind of neat? So there's a little more with layers. Experiment with it. Layers are going to be one of your most useful tools within Elements. And the more you know how they work and the more you experiment with creating new layers, modifying them, changing their opacity, the more fun you're going to have. And of course, I've showed you how once you select a layer, you can move it around. Let me grab the hat, for instance. Now once that layer is selected, what I'm working with over here is only going to affect that layer. You want to remember that. So let's say I had that selected and I wanted to grab the stick guy. Well, I can't grab him because I'm not select. He needs to be selected here in the layer palettes. Whatever object you want to move or modify. Now the hat, if we grab the move tool, now that we're on that layer, we could move that layer around. And you see how it's moving behind the stick figure's clothes? Alright. Oops, I stretched it out. In any case, that's how you move around a layer. We've experimented before with turning them, stretching them. You can do all sorts of things with a layer. What's nice is you're just modifying that layer. Once you get it how you want it, just hit Enter, Enter, and we're done, like so. That looks funky. But let me hit Undo to bring it back to how it was. Alright. Now, there was another option in here called, well, let me bring it up here so you can see it better. You can merge linked layers. You can link layers together so that when you modify one, it modifies the other. You can merge linked layers. But here's the ones that you're going to want to use the most. Let's say you created all these layers. Now, you notice how my filter layer is not visible? Well, here, if you were to merge visible, it's not going to merge this layer because I don't have the eye selected. And merging visible will put all the layers that have the eye next to them into one layer. And you won't be able to modify them individually anymore. Now, let's do that. I'll show you what it does. Like so. And now what we can do is flatten the image. Now the fact that when you have a lot of layers, it takes up more disk space. But when you flatten the image. Then it consolidates everything and it takes up less space. So that's what flatten does. So that's probably the last thing you're going to want to do before you save it and in whatever format you want. So here under Save or Save As, we can save it in a Photoshop format or the common BMP, GIF, JPEG, Camera Raw, or this is Photoshop Raw, really, a TIFF file. You're familiar with that. Whatever format you want to save it in. And then here's some other options, including the organizer, save in version set with original, save layers, save as a copy. I'd leave all these as defaulted the way they are. But there's a little bit more about layers. Experiment and definitely get to know that palette because it's going to be very useful in your use of elements. Enjoy.